My name is Andy Kahan, Director of Author Events here, and I am very excited to welcome and to interview our author this evening. And this part has to be brief because there's really nothing I can tell you that you don't already know. So, with that said, please welcome the creator of the beloved Stephanie Plum series and the #1 best-selling author of more than 60 books with more than 200 million copies in print. It's staggering. Janet Evanovich. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a while since you've been in Philadelphia, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I always like these mics, because it kind of reminds me of an evening with Ranger, right?
I'm going to pretend you're not talking about me. So when was the last time you were in Philadelphia?
I don't know. We were trying to figure that out. I think it must have been about 10 years ago. It was a long time.
So that's quite a while.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, we are so glad to have you with us this time and to launch your new book here at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Just to get a sense of where the audience is, how many of you have read 10 of Janet's books? All right, no bragging necessary. 20. Oh my God. How many of you have read the brand new book already? That's not bad. That's impressive.
Okay, how many of you haven't read any of my books? Out.
Guard, if you could. So it seems you're in the right place tonight. Just to give you the arc of the evening, we'll chat for about 20, 30 minutes, then you will have the floor. I ask that you raise your hand, I'll call on you, and you wait for the microphone. And I can't talk about the new book, which is too bad, although I did see that some people had read it. And the one thing that got me was, did you see that Morelli Ranger tryst coming? No? I didn't either. Yeah, I'm kidding. So, we'll jump right in here. I've read that you started out in the fine arts, not in writing. And I wonder if you could tell us what took you from fine art to the art of writing, and why did you make those choices?
Well, I was always the kid that could draw. So as a kid, I was encouraged in that direction. And when I went to college, I majored in fine arts. I was a painter. And then I got married and I had 2 kids, and I was a stay-at-home mom, most creative thing I've ever done. And while I was home, what I realized is that I was becoming increasingly frustrated with painting. First of all, I don't know if you've read my bio, but I would get a rash from the pigment. That was absolutely true. And one day what I realized is that I was always telling stories to myself about the pictures that I was painting. And I thought, that actually I enjoyed the stories more than I enjoyed making the pictures. And I realized that it was about communication, and that the communication when you do a painting is very vague. And the communication when you're writing, you just have much more of an opportunity to really express yourself and to come to a common ground with your audience, and I like that. And I like the idea that I could have a larger audience, because in the life of a painting, you have a small amount of people coming to see it. And as a writer, I realized that I had much larger opportunity to entertain people, because and as I progressed through this, the other thing that I realized is that what I really was an entertainer, and I still think of myself more as an entertainer maybe than as a writer. I like that aspect of it. I like that I can entertain. I think that's my primary purpose, and then there are like other little secondary purposes and things that I think that I do as a writer, but I do think that entertaining is a noble thing.
So how did you make the leap, though, to romance writing in particular?
I started out writing very strange things. I was a product of the Douglas College Art Department. And
Rutgers University, by the way.
yeah. And we had like amazing people there. I mean, I had Roy Lichtenstein as a teacher. And yeah, so, but it was, the big New York art scene. And it was, you do art for yourself, and if someone else comes and enjoys it, that's great, but that's not your purpose in life. And it took me a lot of years to realize that wasn't my purpose in life. And so I started out writing these very strange things because I thought, I'm going to write something that's so different. Nobody else is going to have written anything like this, and everybody is going to be just so overwhelmed with it. It's going to go to New York, and they're going to be knocking on my door. And, well, it turned out it was so different, nobody wanted it. And I was writing these bizarre things, like about a pornographic fairy in a fairy forest in Pennsylvania, and she was living with a 200-pound bird, and it wasn't good. And so
I've been to that town. It's not.
Yeah, it was. He was bringing her an electric toothbrush, and
Okay, it's enough.
all right, wait, okay. Anyway, so I wrote like 3 books that were never published, and finally, what I realized is that I had to start thinking more about audience and less about Janet, and less about being different. And what I was reading at the time were romance novels. I was a young wife and mother, and this was where I was at in my life, and this was what I understood, and this was what I loved to read. And I decided that that's what I was going to try doing. I was going to try writing one of these short little category romances. And that was how I originally got published, because finally, I kind of got over myself and paid attention to the craft and to the audience and to what it was that I had to offer. And so I was first published in romance, and I did, 12 of those, I believe. Actually, I did 13, but they refused to buy the last one. And
Do you still have it?
I do, and I never gave them their money back either, bastards. It wasn't that much. It wasn't that much.
How did you get from there to, would you call it crime, mystery, suspense? How would you define what you write these days?
I think that I write an adventure story. I think it's actually a composite of a lot of things, and it was designed to be. After I did the 12 romance, actually about halfway through, it was clear that I wasn't exactly in the right place. I was having a hard time getting 300 pages out of sheer relationship. I kept sneaking in little mysteries and little adventures, and my editors kept pulling them out. And I was getting increasingly frustrated. I was having a hard time. What I love is the romantic chase. I love the adventure of 2 people getting to know each other, that feeling, that rush of adrenaline, when you're attracted to someone and you're just not sure, and it's and that was what I really liked about the romance. In romance, you have to have, at least for what I was writing, you had to have some consummate sex scenes, and I wasn't so good at that. I sort of ran out of positions about halfway through.
You should try the Kama Sutra. There are a lot of positions in there. Well, no, but I'm glad you did. Moving on, sorry.
He's encouraging me. You don't want to do this.
Try romance again.
Yeah, it could get, okay. Anyway, so it turned out that I wasn't really good at that. I didn't really enjoy that. I liked the adventure of the chase. And so I decided that I probably needed to move on. I took, and actually I was almost sort of kicked out of romance because my editors were also getting frustrated with me. I wasn't producing what they considered to be a romance novel. It was other stuff. So I took a year off and did a lot of reading and tried to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And while I was doing this, I saw Midnight Run with Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro. And I thought, this is so cool, a bounty hunter. Now, this was, this was like 20-some years ago. This was before Dog. This was before bounty hunters became popular and they were television people. And it was a new thing, and it was something that I knew nothing about. I didn't know about bail bondsmen. I didn't know anything of that part, but I thought bounty hunter had like this cachet to it. So, so that was part of what started me on the Plum series. And what I realized is that I knew that I wanted to have a larger audience. When I was writing category romance, they would put out 6 books every month, and it was a finite number of books. We all had the same print run, and there was no backlist. When those books went, they were gone. You never saw them again. And you had to go to a used bookstore and hunt them down if you wanted them. And you couldn't grow your audience. You had this precise number of books that the publisher put out. So I wanted a larger audience, and at the time, Tom Clancy had just brought out Hunt for Red October. And I realized that what he had done was he had found a hole in the marketplace. And I thought this was so clever, right? Because if you want to have this explosive increase in audience, you have to give them something new. And I mean, this is true across the board for any industry. You know, what product do people need and want and don't have? And Tom Clancy did that, and I thought I could do something like that. Not in as big a way as Tom Clancy, but I could take what was good and what I loved about romance, and I could squash it into a mystery format. Because before that, there were a lot of very successful women mystery writers, but they were pretty much writing men. They were writing hard-boiled, and I wanted to do soft-boiled, you know. So, because Kinsey was cutting her hair with nail scissors, and I mean, I'm from Jersey. We don't do that. We don't. I didn't get that at all. I wanted a heroine, you know, that went to, Mr. Tex at the mall and got. So I put all of these things together, and I started making lists of what it was that I wanted in this new product that I was going to create and attempt to sell. And it all came together in the Plum series. And I sold the first book to Scribner, and they had no idea what they bought. They thought it was a romance. They thought it was a mystery. And it turned out with, Joe Morelli looking under Stephanie Plum's skirt. And, and that just sort of, set up the series for, I don't know, the next, 75 years, something like that.
Well, I'm sure they hope it never ends. Since we're talking about Stephanie, what's the origin of her character? Is it in you? Is it in a friend? Is it what the category demanded?
Stephanie is a little bit of all of us, but she really is a lot of me. She has my background. She went to Douglas College. She comes from a working class blue collar family. She has one sister. She's a bit of a bumbler. But then she has a lot of other characteristics that I find to be admirable. She's tenacious, and this is one of the reasons why she succeeds. She really isn't the best bounty hunter. She doesn't have any background for it. Her temperament might not even be, but she's very tenacious. She sticks with it. She's resilient. She has all these terrible things happen to her, and somehow she manages to bounce back. So I've given her a lot of qualities that I admire. I've given her some of my background. I've given her a bunch of my embarrassing moments, and then I kind of live vicariously through her too. I mean, this is one of the great things about being a writer, is that I get up early. I get up at about 5:30, and I take my coffee and my little dog Ollie. I have a little 10-pound dog. And we go to my office. I have an office in a part of my house, and I get to go into that world. I get to leave my world, and I get to go into some other world that I've created. And this is what gets me up every morning, is that, and sometimes it's Stephanie's world, And I've done a variety of other little mini-series that allow me to go into other people's head and other people's worlds, and that I really like. And I find that when I come back to Stephanie, I always know a little bit more about her because I've been in some other woman's world. And so, and I hope you have tried some of those other series too, and that you enjoy them, because I think they're fun. And I think they're fun not only because they have the same basic entertainment value as Stephanie, but they explore other personalities. Stephanie is someone who just puts one foot in front of the other. She doesn't have big dreams. She has little dreams. She worries about it sometimes. Where am I going? Why don't I have a direction? And yet, her life is full. Her life has meaning. She's actually very heroic in the way that we all are in our daily lives. She pays her rent. She goes to dinner at her mom's house. She is a friend to her friends. She tries to do the right thing. She almost never shoots people.
Always a plus.
The other heroines, I wanted to create some heroines that were a little bit different. I had a 2-book series and then a comic book about a woman whose dad owned a garage, and from the day she could walk, she knew that she was a mechanic. She just loved everything mechanical. She knew how to put a carburetor together, and she ended up working for NASCAR. And she was driven in this direction. She always had purpose. She always knew who she was. I did the Wicked series about a woman who loved baking cupcakes. She went to culinary school. She found out, she sucked at making gravy, but she was great at making cupcakes and desserts, and she loved this. And she had the perfect job. She had the ideal job. She got a job in a little bakery in Massachusetts. And then just when she thought her life was totally on track, this guy came into her life and changed it forever. Okay, so I admit I stole it from Buffy, but what the hell? I mean, she's Buffy. She thought she knew where she was going, and a guy came along and said, "No, you have to save the world. You can't go back from that." And she rose to the occasion, just as my women always do. They rise to the occasion. The men that are in their lives and that they love, Joe Morelli and Ranger, they rise to the occasion. My books really are about people being heroic in large and small and very different ways.
Let's talk about Morelli and Ranger. They seem, these 2 points in Stephanie's constellation of love or not marriage or engaged to be engaged, that sort of thing. What was the origin of those characters?
I guess they came out of my romance background. They both are bad boy heroes. I don't know if you know what a bad boy hero is, but a bad boy hero is a good guy, but he has his own set of moral values, and he does not swerve from that. But he might not fit in entirely with what society deems as being, appropriate behavior. So, I always thought that was interesting. It was a fun point of view to work from. And so when I started the series, I was looking at moonlighting. I loved moonlighting. I loved this tension between Maddie and Dave in moonlighting, and I wanted to do that. So I created Stephanie Plum and Joe Morelli. And that worked for the first book, and it worked for the second book. And then I said, okay, now I have a problem, right? Because here are 2 adults. They're attracted to each other. They're sexy. They're intelligent. Why aren't they going to bed and screwing around like rabbits, right? So, but I didn't want them to. I didn't want to turn this into a family saga. I wanted to keep that tension alive that I just loved, and that I loved in Moonlighting. I don't know how many of you have watched Moonlighting. Yeah, but right, like the final season when they did it, and nobody wanted to watch it anymore. It was done. So anyway, by the 3rd book, I realized I had to have some device to complicate Stephanie's life, and that was Ranger. Ranger and Lula were probably never really meant to be main characters. They were kind of walk-ons. In the first book, Lula was, a hoe, and she was a good hoe. She was a very good hoe. And Ranger, was this kind of, brute. He lived in a vacant lot, and we didn't know a lot about him. And I liked that. I liked that he was sort of mysterious, and we didn't know. By the third book, Lula was working for the bail bonds agency because I fell in love. I couldn't stop thinking about her. When I wrote the second book, she just popped into my head. And she has become increasingly important as the series has gone on. But Ranger, I said, you know what? I can do something with Ranger. I can create a love triangle. It can complicate things. I really didn't fully understand that I was going to have to keep this going for 23 books. But I'm doing the best I can, folks,
Which beckons the question, how do you keep it fresh? 23 books, how do you keep enlivening the series? Particularly when I think you've set a real challenge for yourself in that these characters don't really age.
No, well, but I don't either.
Yeah,
So.
well, there's that. So art follows life.
Yes, you want to know my secret to not aging? Surgery. What was the question?
I don't know. I have no idea. How do you keep it fresh?
How do I keep it fresh? Well, one of the ways is that I do take breaks every now and then and go into another series, just to give myself a break from this particular series. But it also stays fresh because the people change, because times change, and while they don't age, they don't stay static either. There's a little growth in all of the characters in each book, in a variety of directions. And it isn't like it's dramatic, but it's enough that to keep them interesting for me. And the books also are a reflection of society. And I try not to hit people over the head with it, but some of the humor is right out of I Love Lucy. Some of the humor is much more situational. Some of the humor is very topical. In this particular book, Grandma Mazur has she has a boyfriend, and the comment is made as Grandma Mazur is getting off to go to the funeral home that she is really only one of 2 women in this country still wearing pantsuits.
It's true. It's true. With Grandma Mazur, such an amazing character, her obsession with funerals and cookies, where's that from?
Isn't everyone?
Many.
That's my childhood. I grew up in South River, New Jersey, immigrant family. We lived in a big extended family situation with my Aunt Lena, my Uncle Mickey, and my Uncle Chris, and it was a little town. I'm of Danish ancestry. There were a whole bunch of a little pocket of Danes there, stuck in between all the Russians and Polish people. I know what it is to be a minority, because there wasn't a lot of entertainment in the town. There was, but there were 2 funeral homes, and that was it. That was the big deal. That was the social life. And every afternoon, all the ladies in the neighborhood would come over to my Aunt Lena's kitchen, and they would sit and they would go through the obits, and they would decide, what they were going to do that night. And sometimes they didn't know anybody who had died, and they'd go anyway, because Rezum had cookies, and it was the funeral home of choice because they thought that his makeup was much better than Malashevsky's. And so, but I mean, that's my childhood.
That's just right out of life.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about how your day unfurls earlier, and I wonder if you ever sit down before the page and just get flummoxed, or the screen, and don't know what to do next, or you've got 23 books now, so it's, at least in this series, so it's not an issue.
No, they pay me a lot of money. And it turns out if you don't give them a book, they don't give you any more money. It's very motivating.
It's that simple?
No, I don't. I have a work ethic, and again, it comes right out of South River. It was. I don't understand writer's block. I think it's like any other job that you do. If you're going to work at 7-Eleven, you show up on time, you do your job, and that's what I do. I get up in the morning, and I go into my office, and I sit down, and I go to work. And some days, all I do is think, and I might type 4 sentences on my computer. And other days, I might get 10 pages. But I always go in and I put in my time. And eventually, something comes out of that. And I think that's very American, right? That's what we do. Is that your stomach?
Is
that
not
what
my
is
stomach.
that?
It's the wheels in my brain turning.
Can you hear that out there?
Yeah,
this
somebody's
groaning?
moving chairs around right above us.
Okay, all right. I just didn't want anyone to think it was me.
We have to talk about junk food, because I know it seems like it's out of left field, but it's an obsession in the books, at least for some of the characters. Also an obsession of yours?
Junk food.
Junk food.
All food. All food is. Yeah. Yeah, as it turns out, I can't eat as much junk food as I would like to anymore. Like I used to write books on cheese doodles. I mean, you give me a bag of cheese doodles, I am so damn funny and clever. I just can't stand myself. And so I did a whole bunch of books like that. And I mean, I could knock out a book in 3 months if I have enough cheese doodles. And then one day, my stomach said, no, that's it, done. And, projectile vomiting if you give me so if anybody brought cheese doodles, thank you, I'll take them.
And Stephanie's love of Fig Newtons, is that not a love of yours also?
Oh, yeah, everybody loves Fig Newtons.
Yeah,
Fig Newtons and Oreos and donuts and hot dogs. And, I mean, it just goes on and on. I happen to love a McDonald's cheeseburger. And again, I think that this is a reflection of the world that I've created, and it's a real world. And, okay, so we have to eat vegetables, and we know we're supposed to, not have all carbs and sugar and all that kind of stuff. But it's more fun to eat junk food.
Always.
And I'm all about fun.
Last question before we turn it over to the audience. Family's so important in your books and obviously in your life. It seems that with Lula and Stephanie, they've and the whole bail bond environment at Vinnie's, they've created this little contentious family. And I know that you work with your family in this business, and I wonder if you could talk a bit about how roles get assigned in that little biome of family responsibility.
In my family?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was trying to get published, and it was a long, hard road, I wrote books and sent them out for 10 years before I finally got a break. And my kids were little and they were growing up, and my husband has a good job. He has a doctorate in mathematics. But, we don't come from money, and we didn't have anything to start with. And I was a stay-at-home mom. We were competing with, two-income families. And they were just very encouraging. Everybody always said, keep going, you can do it. My husband took 2 jobs. My kids didn't, have the fanciest clothes, and we didn't have great furniture. But I had this opportunity to try to do this. And so when I finally was published, and it wasn't for a lot of money, but it was a step in the right direction. I did those romances. By that time, my kids were in high school and in college. My son was very proud of the fact that his mother was sending him through on soft porn. He got a lot out of that one. And then, I went on to do the Plum series, and all along, it really was my family. I would not be sitting here today if I didn't have the support of my family. And so when I sold the first Plum book, and TriStar bought it to make it into a movie, that was worth $1 million. And that just totally changed our lives, because I knew that, first of all, we took that $1 million, and when that phone call came in, it was, we were living in this little tiny brick house in Fairfax, Virginia, and we didn't have a lot of money. And the call came in at like 9 o'clock at night, because on the West Coast, of course, it's 6 o'clock, and they had just finished bidding on the book. And I looked out the window, and in the moonlight, all of the shingles from my house were laying on the front lawn, shining. And we had no money to get a new roof. And then here was this phone call saying, we just sold movie rights for $1 million. And so I was like the Joker. I didn't stop smiling for 3 days. My husband said it was really scary being in bed with me, because I was sleeping with this smile, right? Anyway, we paid off all of our kids' education loans, which were massive. We paid off all of our credit cards. We put a new roof on the house. And then, and by this time, my kids were out of college. And we said to them, this is going to work for us, and you can do whatever you want. You can, if you want to go to law school, we have the money to help you do this. If you want to open a small business, whatever. Or you can join in, and we can form our own little business, and you can help me continue to write. And they chose to do that. My daughter graduated from Brooks in Santa Barbara. It's a film and photography school. My son graduated from Dartmouth, as he was, at the time, working for the Supreme Court on the Hill. And they decided that they were going to be part of the business. And so, and they still are. And I would not be the success without them, because they're all very talented people, including my husband. So we left Virginia, we moved to New Hampshire. My husband took over the management of the organization. My son took over our finances. My daughter started a website for us. I was one of the first authors to have a really good, imaginative website that people could come and be entertained at. And we just moved on from there, and they still work for me. My son is still our finance officer, and he helps to edit the books. He is very good at helping to do the initial plotting, especially with the co-authors. My daughter is liaison between me and the publisher. She has a couple very talented people who work for her. One of them is Gail, sitting right here. Okay, so if you stay for the signing, you have to say hello to Gail. She'll give you a button or something. And Alex also is my first editor, works very closely with the co-authors. So we really are, a little family business, because it's turned out to be big business. When you get to a certain level, you're making a certain amount of money, you're putting out X number of books, you have to spend some of your time being a business person. I have friends that are at that level, and they just enjoy being an author. And but for me, that didn't work, because I wanted world domination. And
You got it, at least in Philadelphia. Janet Evanovich.
Hi, Janet. It's really great to see you. You talk very easily about the transition from being a fine artist to being a writer, but what you left out is the essential piece of all these books, which is the humor. Where did the humor come from, and how did do you also feel that that's the prime moving force in the Stephanie Plum books?
I think some of the humor came from just growing up in New Jersey. Yeah. No, I'm serious. If I had grown up in New Hampshire, oh, no. New Jersey has it has energy. It has it's the people are amazing, and they kind of get over themselves, and it's like my views on political correctness. And so I think some of it came from Jersey. Some of it just came from, as a kid watching I Love Lucy and growing up in that environment. And I grew up at a time when you were allowed to be funny. And now, you have to worry about, being the, politically correct police coming and dragging you off. It's so restrictive. But the funny part is the easy part for me. I think I look at things from a different perspective, from a different point of view. And the hard part for me is actually, writing some more of the serious parts of it. And I think that as a writer, the most difficult part are the connections when you're moving from one scene to the next. Technically has always been the most difficult, and I think is probably one of the most important things if we have any would-be writers out there, moving your reader from one scene to the next effortlessly. Very difficult.
Hi, we love your stories. What made you choose Trenton?
I'm a Jersey girl, and but I thought South River was too small. I didn't think it would have enough realistic crime. I could be wrong. It was like, what's the lady's name in Cabot Cove, Maine? Right? Yeah, Fletcher, okay, like she lived in this little town and people were murdered every day. And I was like, what? I don't know if I could pull that off. By then my parents had moved. They were living in Mercerville, and we were going into Trenton, into the Burg, to restaurants, and it's changed a lot since then. You don't want to go into the Burg now. It's a little dicey, but it was a place where I spent a lot of time when I was in my 20s and 30s.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm wondering how it is collaborating with other authors. Could you talk a little bit about the process?
Yeah, it's a little like wearing someone else's underpants, right? It's something you want to do, but you don't feel entirely comfortable.
You all know how that feels.
Actually, I really like it. Writing is very solitary, and I'm basically a person with no social skills, so I'm very well suited for it. But I find that the collaborative part of working with another author is fun too. And the people that I have worked with have been people that I've known for a very long time. Lee Goldberg and Fief Sutton, I've known for probably 20 years. I met them when I first started touring as a writer, and I was out in California. They're both in the television industry, and they were kind of tired of what they were doing. They wanted to try something different, and we decided that we would work together. And it was a lot of fun, and they brought something new to, I think, to the product. And the way that we worked is that we would decide ahead of time exactly what we were going to create, what the characters were going to be, what the formula, if you will, would be, whether they were a con man or whatever. And then I let them write the book, and then they hand the book in to me, and I totally change it.
It seems. Go ahead.
It works, it works separately.
Stephen J Kennell, I know you were supposed to write a book with him.
Oh, we were a disaster together.
Oh, you were. Oh, because it seemed like, wow, that would be such a great opportunity to make something like that work.
Oh,
and
we were
it
we were
didn't work.
terrific friends, and you put us on two bar stools side by side, and magic. And we tried writing a book together. We almost killed each other. We could not agree on anything, and the book, yeah, we were like, and it wasn't like we didn't try, but and that book never saw the light of day. We just couldn't finish it. We were such different people when it came to writing.
And did you maintain your friendship afterward?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, he was a great person. He really was. He was a lot of fun. He was unique. He was brilliant. He was Mr. Television in the 70s. But we were like oil and water trying to write a book together.
So for any of your non-readers, what book would you recommend that they start off with?
Men or women? Okay, you. I think the Plums are fun. Actually, the truth is, you can start off with any of them. I think that the entertainment value is the same on all of the series, and I think that the Fox and O'Hare books are more plot-driven. Yep, they're a little more plot-driven. They have more action at a higher level. They're international, so if that is what turns you on, then that's where you would want to go. I have a series, the Wicked series, about this scruffy guy Diesel, and so if you like something that has, and it's not like he's a superhero, it's not like he's an angel, it's not like he's a werewolf. He's just a little different. So if you like that little thing of almost fantasy, that would be the one. But I think that the Plum series kind of seems to resonate with just about everyone. And I think you can start anywhere in the Plum series because they're all self-contained. But it probably is fun to start at the first book, One for the Money. Yeah. Now you have to understand that I wrote this back before there were cell phones. She was wearing scrunchy socks and
Ranger has a pager.
yes, he has a pager.
What's that?
I know. So it's like, going back in history, it's like Nancy Drew, right?
With
And
curse
do you
words.
remember, Nancy Drew? I read Nancy Drew when I was a kid, and then all of a sudden they decided they were going to remake Nancy Drew, and they changed the covers and they updated her and everything, and I hated that. I'm not doing that, right? So, remember Ned Nickerson when
It still rankles.
he was a good guy?
Well, I also really enjoy reading your books. But listening to you talk, it sounds as if you really didn't get started writing until your kids were grown. So I'm just wondering, how many books do you write in a year, or what's your pace?
I was really afraid she was going to ask how old I was.
I would never do that, never.
As it turns out, I'm now younger than my children. I used to write one book a year. Actually, when I was writing romances, I was writing anywhere from 3 to 5 books a year, depending on how bad I needed the money. Now I write, I was writing 1 book a year, and then it went up to 2. And now with the co-authors and with the writing schedule that I have, I'm doing anywhere from 2 to 4 books a year. And 2 books a year is very comfortable. It takes me, because I write a little bit faster now, I think that my skill level allows me to do that. I know where I'm going. I have a housekeeper. So 2 books a year is very comfortable. 4 books a year is a push for me.
Why speed it up, though? Why not dial back now that you're this worldwide phenomenon? All right, never mind.
I have the keys to the candy store. I finally have a measure of success where I can do what I want. And when I have a crazy idea, someone is willing to allow me to do it. And, it's fun. It's exhilarating.
What do you do when you're not writing?
I'm always writing.
Oh. For fun?
I'm really boring. I don't have any hobbies. I hate sports. I don't like to exercise.
Music?
No. I went to a mystery conference in the spring and in Nashville, and they gave me a guitar. And then there were all these pictures of me holding the guitar wrong. I got all this email, but I listen, to music once in a while. But mostly I write. It's what I do. I have a dog. I walk the dog. And then when I get too fat, they hire a trainer. This happens a lot. Because otherwise I would never get out of the chair. And then eventually my ass is so big that they can't get me out of the chair.
Hi, it's a pleasure. I'm a teacher, and I love to inspire students to write, and I really resonated with me how you say you always think about your audience when you write. But I always wonder, when you're organizing a story, do you have like a huge storyboard on your wall? How do you organize your thoughts when you're first getting a story down?
I used to storyboard. I did. I used to have a whiteboard, and I would storyboard very much like what they do in the movies. And I actually construct my books in 3 parts, very much like a movie, so that you have plot points at like maybe around page 100 and 200 that kind of spins your action around, moves it in another direction, and ups the ante. Right, that's where I kill people, at page 100 and 200. Well, you guys are laughing along, thinking this is one big jolly ride. You got to shake things up once in a while, so I drop in a body, dead body. But now what I do is I make myself just a little outline, really kind of an action line. I know the beginning, I know the end, I know a couple things in the middle, I know who the bad guy is, and I write out some things. And I just do this on a yellow pad, and it takes maybe a couple pages. And I follow that along. When I go to bed at night, I have a steno pad, and before I go to bed, I jot down what I did that day and where I want to go tomorrow. And then while I'm sleeping, somehow it all kind of comes together in my head, so that I wake up and I have all these ideas and I know where I'm going. And that lasts for about an hour and a half. and then it's ugly after that.
Are you revising the next day, or are you just plowing forward?
I revise as I go. I'm actually a very slow writer. I don't write stream of consciousness. Like I said, sometimes I do much more thinking than writing. I'll sit and I'll think for an hour and a half of how I want to accomplish wherever I'm going next. And then I'll write a couple sentences, or I might get a couple, if it's an action scene, I'll get 2 to 3 pages out of that. I write a lot of dialogue. The more that I go along, the more dialogue I write. And I think that's because, and I hadn't even thought about this, but I always see my books as movies. I physically see my characters moving. I see them in New Jersey. I see them in the house. I see them in the car. And I walk through with them. And I learned how to write dialogue by doing improv on stage, because I had no skills when I decided to be a writer. And what I realized is that actors do very much the same thing as writers. And they create character. They decide how they're going to show their audience that character. It's by, mannerisms, the nervous things that you do with your hands, the way that you sit, the way that you walk across the stage. And so I actually did some improv on stage, learning how to create dialogue, learning how to create character and show it to the audience.
I also heard you were a champion eavesdropper.
Yes, I'm very sneaky, yes. Yeah, I am. I go to bars and I listen to pickup lines and I watch people, and I go to shopping centers and I watch people, and I walk the dog and I, look in people's windows. I don't, I mean, I don't creep up on their lawn or anything, but yeah, I think that as writers, we're all observers. I mean, that's a large part of it. We are people watchers, and we listen to the way people talk, to accents, and the way they dialogue, and the way people show emotion, and all of those things. We collect all of those things as writers.
I absolutely adore your books. But I'm the same way. Like when I read a book, I can actually see the characters and all. And then if I'm telling somebody about it, there's a lot of times where I'm not sure if it was a movie I watched or a book that I read, because I can actually vividly see the characters like it was a movie. So I thought that was really neat that you were saying that. I was hitting her like, oh my gosh, that's me.
Yeah, I think we should get you to talk to Sony. So I would love to have a television show. Yeah. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why my books are so filled with dialogue, because that's the way that I see it. That's the way that I hear it.
At this point, couldn't you produce a pilot yourself, write one and shoot it, or hire a crew, or that sort of thing, just on spec?
It's hard to do. No, I mean, I know people do it, but first of all, I would have to make a choice of writing books or doing that. And, writing books is what I do, and it's my first love. So I would rather have somebody else do that, and then I could watch it. It'd be fun.
Come up with some ideas that way. There's a lady back there.
Hi, Janet. What you were saying about the comedy part, I listen to most of your books on CD while I'm driving, and I will just laugh and laugh, and people will come alongside me, and I'm like an idiot in my car, hysterically laughing at something that Grandma said or Lulu said. So you do get the comedy right. And my question is, first off, I love Nicholas Fox. When are you going to have another Nicholas Fox book? And what authors do you read?
Sadly, I do not get much chance to read. In the past, I've read a lot of mystery. When I was thinking about creating the Plum series, I was a huge Robert B. Parker fan. Michael Connelly is a good friend, and I read his books. But I find that when I'm writing, and I'm almost always writing, I have a very hard time reading someone else's book, because then I go to bed with that book in my head, and I don't wake up with my book in my head. So I find it easier for me to watch movies, television. I'm like a big fan of the Property Brothers. Yeah, House Hunters International. Yeah, that's where. Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Janet Evanovich.